table talk discussion on how to start and run a classical Lutheran high school will be presented by Mr. Tim Merritt, who serves in many roles at Faith Lutheran School in Plano, Texas, including high school principal, technology coordinator, and high school teacher. He's been at Faith since 1998 and was instrumental in starting the high school. He teaches omnibus, a combination of theology, literature, history, logic, rhetoric, computer applications. Please welcome Mr.
Well, I did have a PowerPoint presentation that I put together, but I can't get my computer to work, so you just have to follow along with the handout I gave. All right, so as he mentioned, I've been at Faith for a long time, including through the process of us becoming a classical school, because to start with, it was just a Lutheran school. And I actually came to Faith the first year that Pastor Keyser came his first term. So he and I actually started in the same year at that particular time. And then when he went away to seminary, I served as headmaster for 7, 8 years, something like that there. And during that time, we moved into starting the high school. And so I do have a little bit of information about how we did it and some ideas on things that you can do. All right, so my first big point is to start at the end. And what I mean by that is it's very important that you think about what your vision for the school in its finished capacity is going to look like. It's important that you have an idea of those things. It's important that you are able to be dreaming a little bit at this point, but also be realistic and think about what type of school you want to have, how big you want it to be, what types of programs you want it to offer, and so forth. It's important to think about those things at the beginning. So there's a bazillion different things that we could talk about. I could get my computer to work so it's not going to turn the projector. So it's important, there's a lot of different things we could talk about. I'm going to try to talk for not the whole time so that you guys have time to answer questions, because I'm sure people came in with very specifics. These are some of my thoughts on what you need to think about. First of all, Lutheran first, classical second. This is very important in my opinion because obviously I'm speaking somewhat to the choir, as they say, with this particular group that's here. But I don't see anywhere in Scripture that churches would be called upon to start non-church related entities. So for me, that's the most important thing. You start out, it's got to be Lutheran first in your theology and unapologetically so. Once you've got that straight, then you can move on to this classical as well. Governance, you need to think about at the beginning. Is this going to be run by a single congregation? Or are you going to have an association of schools that operate this? Maybe you're going to organize as an RSO, but you need to think about what your organization is going to be. Then the next question is, who can serve on your board then? Is it only members of the congregation? If it's tied to a congregation, who all can serve on this board? Another thing to keep in mind with your governance is boards set policies. They don't run the school. Administrators set procedures and run day-to-day operations with the teachers and staff. Boards don't run day-to-day operations. So having that distinction from the start. Other things to think about. Size. How many students do you think would be ideal to have? What's the maximum number that you would ever want to have? And tied closely to that, what kind of student-teacher ratio do you think is best for your model? Curriculum and graduation requirements. Think about how many years of each subject you're going to require. Think about whether or not you'll have multiple tracks for graduation. Are you going to have a distinguished track? Are you going to have a regular core track? We'll talk about this in relation to faith in a minute. Do you intend to offer all the required classes on site, or are you going to utilize some of the opportunities for dual credit to cover some of the materials when they get to the upper levels? And then what facilities would you need to offer these classes? This is particularly important for classes like science, where you need a good lab. What programs do you want to offer? Maybe the answer is none in your particular situation. But what sports might you want to offer? And of course, you should always think about why do you want to offer them. I'll give you the 2 reasons why we offer them at Faith here in a minute. What facilities would you need to offer these sports programs? How about clubs? Are you planning on offering any clubs? What personnel and funds would you need to be able to do that? Then cost. You need to think about how much it's going to cost to run such a school. And I'm going to strongly encourage you, don't do what so many of our Lutheran schools across the nation have done. Don't be ashamed to say what it actually costs to run a good school. In other words, don't be ashamed to say that your church workers that you're hiring deserve to have a living wage. Don't undersell that. If this is a new startup that you're doing, brand new school, never existed before, you should try to bring your administrator on board a year before startup, ideally. And you should try to have raised enough money to have that year's worth of their salary in hand when you call them to come in. So that just gives you a little bit of an idea of how much money you want to raise up front on some of these. If it's a K through 12 school intending to add a high school like we were, you try to raise, you're encouraged to try to raise a year's worth of costs. Now you'll make up some of that in what you actually get in tuition and other things like that, but try to raise that money up front so that if you don't hit some target number, the schools can still start. And I'll get to why that's important in a minute. Think about what your community might see as an ideal tuition rate. If there's a gap between what it costs and what you think you can charge, how are you going to fill that gap? What are you going to use for financial assistance? What are you going to use for a surplus of money that you can draw from? And then staffing. Lutheran teachers make Lutheran schools. I cannot stress this enough. It's always baffles my mind when I see these other, they're not classical schools in Texas, but these other Lutheran schools that have hired a huge percentage of their teachers aren't even Lutheran. How are you having Lutheran, doctrine presented and practices presented by people that don't even know what it is? It doesn't make any sense. Are you going to use part-time or full-time teachers? To start with, a lot of times people end up using some part-time to help keep the costs down at the beginning when you're getting a school started, and we'll get to some examples of that in a minute. And then where you can find good quality people. So let's look at how this played out at Faith. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Synod's Genesis project that they've got, but it is a good resource they will come in and they'll do demographic studies, they'll interview tons of people within your congregation, within the community, they'll look at other schools in the area, and they will give you their assessment on whether or not you should proceed. And they will basically say, well, you can do what you want, but there is not enough interest to support this school based on what we found. They'll be honest with you if there isn't, right? But they'll give you some good information. So Faith did utilize them. We brought them in and brought them in to help us to determine this. The findings were basically what we hoped for, which was there was enough support, there was enough interest, and so we were able to proceed further. So Lutheran first and classical second, I mentioned before. Faith Lutheran School, first and foremost, strives to teach the faith to our children. All right, the children of the congregation. That's primarily who we exist for first and foremost, and to prepare them to live that faith. We're unapologetically Lutheran, but we don't exclude non-Lutherans if they're willing to partner with us. So we do have a percentage of students that are not Lutheran that attend our school. I think it's around 20%, something like that. Interestingly enough, in the high school, it's almost nobody. Almost everyone that stays on through the high school is members of our church or other area Lutheran churches. Secondly, we want our students to be lifelong Christians who teach the faith to their children, participate in word and sacrament, and witness to those with whom they come in contact. Third, we believe that the classical model helps to develop young adults who recognize the good, the true, and the beautiful, and strive to develop a love of these things and a love of virtue. So why classical? That's the why classical. We also believe that the classical model produces well-rounded adults who are ready to be productive citizens. So we do live in this world as well, and we're prepping for that. All right, so governance. Faith is a single congregation operated high school, which a lot of people, when we first were getting ready to start it, raised a lot of eyebrows about that and didn't think that a single congregation could operate a high school. You know, I heard that over and over again. Associations start high schools. I heard this over and over again. We did have enough support that we were able to make this work. One of the main reasons that we are a single congregation, one, is there were not that many congregations that are close to us that in practice are where faith is at, and we did not want to give up any part of control of the school. So it's our school. Only voting members of Faith Lutheran Church can serve on our Board of Christian Education, and we do have a great supportive board that understands their role and empowers the headmaster to do his job. Size. Originally, we settled on 80 students kind of as a long-range goal. We're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and there are some massive schools there. Prince of Peace had 900 students at the time. They had 1,280 over at Prestonwood, and they got almost 1,500 at Trinity. I mean, just huge schools that are out there. We never wanted to be that, all right? And one of the main reasons that we did not want to be a mega school is, I mentioned before, Lutheran first. If you take 80% non-members into your school, good luck remaining Lutheran. It's going to be very difficult to do. They need to come from the same place that we're coming from. And so we strive to maintain the majority of our students, being Lutheran. We originally started with the idea of a 21 student-to-teacher ratio when we started actually getting them into class and trying to get good discussion going. We determined that 16 is kind of our maximum class size. We don't want to go larger than 16. Anything between 12 and 16 is a pretty good number for most of the classes that we do. Some of the classes, obviously, you'd like it to be closer to the 12 than the 16, but up to 16 we found is pretty manageable. I have 15 in the current freshman class that's just coming in, so we got a bunch in that class. Regarding the curriculum and graduation requirements, we do have multiple tracks for graduation. I gave you as the attached sheet that's got the color on it. These are our 3 tracks for graduation. We have our core track, honors track, and distinguished. To graduate in the honors track, you need to take at least 8 classes at the honors level over your 4 years. To graduate distinguished, you have to take every single class that we have at the hardest level that's available. So every time you get a choice of 2 classes, you have to pick the harder one all the way through. Even in our core track, though, you still have to do 4 years of English, 4 years of history, 4 years of theology, 4 years of science, 4 years of math, at least 3 years of Latin. So even in our core track, it's still a pretty rigorous program. So we do have 3 tracks. That's what we settled on for that. We have heavily utilized dual credit over the years. To start with, it was when they got past a certain level in math, for example. We didn't have a math teacher at that time who could teach a higher level math class, and so they used to do that through dual credit. We still utilize it quite a bit now, and it's mostly so that they can get classes that we're not able to offer. For example, there's a couple of the girls that are attending this conference here that have taken art classes over at the community college, which are beyond we don't have a specialist in that area to do those types of things. My son took an engineering class. He also took a welding class because he wanted to learn how to weld. So I mean, there's all kinds of things that they can take that we're not able to provide. It also allows them to knock out a lot of general education requirements. My son John will be a senior here at Concordia Seward next year, and his wife will be a junior, her 3rd year here, but she's going to graduate this year because she had so many credits when she graduated. Most of our kids graduate with about 30 college credits. So they are able to get a lot of those in there. A lot of them come through Concordia, Nebraska. Some of the others come from a community college that's about 10 minutes from us. Regarding facilities, we were fortunate that we already had a building that was big enough to house it. So we had classroom space, we had a gymnasium already, we had a science lab that we poured about $50,000 into renovating and improving. We're still continuing to do updates to that as well. One of the things I was hoping to show you on the slide presentation was what we did with my classroom. If you came to the conference last year, one of the themes that they were talking about is, if you want them to see the good, the true, and the beautiful, that you display that in your classroom as well, and so forth. And so, 2 summers ago, we did a major renovation to my classroom, and I had pictures to show you the before and after, so you could have seen what that looked like. But we did new flooring that has a marble look to it. We went from the type of ceiling tiles that are probably in most Lutheran schools across the nation, which are those big ones like that have that horrible pattern on them that always look terrible. We went from that to the ones that are actually 3-dimensional and come down that are just the 2x2s and so on and so forth. We replaced all the lighting with LED lights, and I have spent a lot of my birthday and Christmas money over the years buying art for my room. So I have a bunch of different bronze statues displaying different things from the omnibus curriculum that I teach. In there, we have a big painting of the Lord's Supper. We have a painting of the School of Athens. We have a bunch of different artwork in my room. And so part of that is to try to inspire them with beautiful things. We also went from the old plastic chairs that all the kids sit on in most of the schools. We actually bought nice padded, big wide chairs for the students to sit on. And I didn't like the fact that we had like 4 different kinds of tables that they sat at that were different colors and all. So I actually refinished all the tables in this really nice black. It's a really nice black with a sparkle finish in it. So we did a lot of things to improve that. Now, why would you want to take the time to do that? Why is it worth doing that? Well, we believe the classroom should inspire students and provide an environment conducive to learning, and that they're proud to attend. All right. We've seen in just other renovations and other things that we've done at the school that the kids seem to take better care of the place when it's nicer. They seem to take a little more pride in it and seem to be a little more sensitive to that. We also wanted my room was supposed to be kind of a showpiece to show everyone this is what we hope to do to all the rooms eventually. We're going to keep upgrading them. I have one of my former students is now teaching with me, so Stephen Kreitcher's here somewhere, and he has bought beautiful, huge paintings that are all down the side of his wall now too. So he's got some really nice things as well. But I do think that you should think about that when you're starting your school up as well, is what you want your facility to look like and what type of an image you're trying to portray or take forward. Programs. We do consider sports as important. I don't know how much you know about Texas, but if you don't have something involving football, you're going to be in trouble. So we don't have a tackle team. We used to, but we don't have a tackle team right now. But we do have a flag football team, at least, so we've got that. But we also do volleyball, soccer, basketball, cross country. We're hoping to add track as we go forward as well. We have a full-time teacher who's our athletic director, teaches all the PE classes and coaches a bunch of things as well. He also teaches some of the dual credit health classes and things like that. And so we're very blessed with that. We believe that it's important for 2 reasons. First of all, if you're trying to educate the whole person, the body is part of the person. All right, so we're trying to make sure that we do that. In addition, I'm sure it's no secret to most of you that the American model for how classrooms are run is not the best for boys. I think you're aware of that. They don't like to sit there all day and not do anything physical. So we have different ways for them to get up and to do things. So after lunch, we usually either go to the gym or I take them outside for a while and they get to run around and do some stuff. The girls love doing it too, but boys in particular need to burn some energy off as we go along. The other thing it does is sports do cultivate school spirit. There is something to be said for that. We also have a number of clubs that we have, depending on the interest and available leaders. Some of the ones that we've been running here are a chess club. Mrs. Mildred does a strategy game club where she teaches them Catan and all these other strategy games and things like that I don't even know how to play, but they look like they have a lot of fun when they do it. We've had sewing where they did quilt making, they did patchwork, they did, what was the they were doing last year, what do you call it, needlepoint or whatever it's called. So they were doing that one as well. We've had cooking classes in the past, which guys like to go to just as much as the girls. And then starting this year, we're going to be doing car maintenance with the people as well. So teaching them how to check your oil, how to change your oil. For the ones that want to get a little more advanced, I'll show them how to do a great job too. So, but we're going to do different things like that. All right, so cost. Typically, about 80% of your cost is typically salary, and that should say benefits. I don't know what benefits are, but benefits is what it should have said. But salary and benefits tends to be the majority of your cost. If you've never run a school before, you maybe didn't know that, but almost all of your money is tied up in the people. And the other things are a fraction of the cost of that. When we first started, all you people out in rural areas don't have a heart attack. Yours don't have to be this high. This is Dallas-Fort Worth area. This is what it takes to operate something, okay? But our cost was about $8,000 per student, and we charged $6,500 to the first group going through. We gave them a 20% discount that we carried through all 4 years to thank them for being willing to step out with us and be the guinea pig class. And the way that we were able to fund that is we raised $50,000 that we had in the bank, and we just drew off of that. I think we took about $17,000 out the first year, and then like $10,000, and then spent the rest of the third year to cover as the school group. So we had put that money aside. We had done fundraising for it, and were able to cover the gap between those two things. We also used students because we were adding on. We used teachers from our current middle school program. We just added, now you're going to teach biology too. You were our science teacher for the middle school. Now you're going to teach biology next year. And we were fortunate and able to do that. We had somebody that had a master's degree in that area already, and so she was qualified to go on and continue teaching in our program. And then I mentioned before part-time. We were very blessed. We had somebody in our congregation who had taught over 40 years as a math teacher, high school math teacher. And he came to me when I put a thing in there saying, does anyone know a math teacher? And he said, well, I'm retiring next year, but I'll give you 3 years and teach part-time if that would help get the school started. And so we were very blessed. Mr. Bruno was his name, and he came forward and he did a great job with the kids. The kids still talk about him. So the ones that from way back then, his daughter had it for a couple classes. So we were able to use some part-time teachers to get started. I already mentioned that we also raised another $50,000 that went into our science lab, so it's like $100,000 that it took to kind of make this jump and to move into there. Now we're spending about $12,000 per student because we have more teachers with benefits now instead of part-time teachers and so on and so forth. We're going to have 37 kids in high school next year. And our tuition and fees is about $12,000 also, so that's where that comes from. I know that sounds like a lot, but there is no other Christian high school in our area that comes within $8,000 of what we're charging. Even the other Lutheran high school that's in the area is over 20 grand a year. So these, I mean, that's what I paid to go to college. That's insane that it's that much now, but that's what it costs in that area and so forth. We don't charge that much for a couple different reasons, one of which is we are still a parish school, which means that our congregation is extremely generous in paying for the lights and the building upkeep and all that type of stuff. So they help out a lot with those types of things in there. So we're blessed to do that. And quite frankly, we don't have families that most of them could afford a $20,000 a year tuition. So if you raise it to that level, you're going to push out the ones that you want to keep and, again, lose the character of your school. Staffing then. Faith only hires LCMS member teachers, and I know that doesn't, LCMS is a wide range nowadays. LCMS conventional teachers is who we're primarily hiring. We do require our full-time teachers to be rostered, or if they come into our school and they were not coming through a Concordia or whatever, they need to go through colloquy so they can get certified and so forth with that. I mentioned that we made great use of part-time teachers when we got started. We also do ask our teachers to obtain CCLE certification. All right, so where can you find quality people? Well, here's a really good place, CCLE. It's a really good place to find some quality teachers and so forth. You can post your positions on the CCLE site if you're, get in touch with them and so forth. You also can see people post that they're looking, that they're seeking a job. That's a good place to go to. I put Concordia and the district with question marks because I know what audience I'm speaking to here, so I'm going to say something really controversial. I still think that there is value in getting somebody who actually was trained to be a teacher. All right, I know that that's controversial in CCLE circles because a lot of people think they just need to be good doctrinally and have some content knowledge. And then the teacher comes in and I ask them to write an yearly plan of how they're going to get through their curriculum, and they have not a clue how to do this. Or I ask them what they're going to use for classroom management techniques, and they don't have a clue because they've never been trained in any of these things. So I think that there's still some value in considering people from the Concordias. Now, I was talking to people earlier in the conference who were saying that there's just not that many coming out anymore like there used to be. So that's part of the challenge there. There just aren't very many that are coming out of the Concordias like there used to be. Seward and Wisconsin still crank out some teachers, but not like it used to be. So also, can you go to your district and go through that call process? Yes, certainly you should keep in contact with your district and do all of that as well. But really staying active with the CCLE people is a great way to get some names and find some quality people and to find some people that can really benefit your schools. Because as I said before, the teachers are a huge component of having a good school. You want to get the right people in, have the right mindset and qualifications. So, like I said I was going to try to zip through this pretty quick so that there was some time for, plenty of time for questions, because I'm sure you have some specific questions that you're looking for.
We are a hybrid school working with homeschoolers. What do you think the potential is to do a high school setting within that framework where the parents continue to homeschool?
I think that's very feasible. There's one that's probably, I don't know, Lucas Christian, 15 minutes from our location, and they use the university model, which very much sets well with homeschooling because you go to school 2 days a week and then you're home 3 days a week, or 3 days and then 2 depending on what you're taking, and you can have them, pick and choose what you're going to do. We're very friendly to homeschoolers at our school. I have a number of homeschool students that take classes. I've got, I don't know how these kids do it. I've got a couple of families who have their kids enrolled in classical conversations and then send them to my omnibus class. I don't know how anyone reads that much, because you combine those two things and that's just nuts how much reading they're doing. But I've got a couple of families that do that. And so we've been able to combine with them and do that type of thing as well. But I think very much you could do something where you're partnering with them to be a resource for that as well. Yes?
How would you handle a transfer into your school in, say, 10th or 11th grade there and fulfilling like your theology requirement?
Our theology requirement is per year that you're attending our school, because there are people that move. That's just the way that is. And so, for example, we had somebody who came in as a junior that graduated last year, and so she would only have had 2 years of theology with us, so she only got the last 2 years of the, still able to graduate because there was no way that she could do it at the school that she was at before that. We did not budge on the 4 years of the core subjects and so forth on that. We did make sure that they got through all of that. I will say it's really difficult for the student to make that transition, to come into a program like ours. Because, I mean, she went from a program where she was in her honors English class and had thought that doing 8 books the year before was a lot, and we'll slide through that in half a semester. That's nothing in our program to go through that type of reading. So it was an adjustment period certainly for her. We do allow transfers though, partly because people join your congregation and move into the area as well. And what are you're gonna tell somebody in your own church that you're not gonna take them if they're qualified? So, we definitely do that. Yes.
How do your K-8 and your high school schools operate together? What do you do separately?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. We do still have teachers that are teaching in both areas. For example, the Latin teacher does 6th grade through 12th grade Latin. The science teacher does 6th through 12th in science, and so on and so forth. So there's still some overlap that way. We also invite them to certain things over the course of their time in middle school. We have the students go down and do presentations to them to talk to them about what the school is like and why they should come and so forth. And then, because the high school is still not enormous, especially last year and the year before, we did have some 8th grade boys and girls playing up on our sports teams. So they were able to interact that way. So that's one way that we have them interact.
What about governance? Is it the same, or do you have 2 separate?
No, it's all, yeah, it's all together. I'm the principal of the high school, and Pastor Kieser's the headmaster, so he's technically my boss, and then I kind of run things in the high school, the day-to-day type stuff for the most part, and all of that, and he does more of the just overall school things. So that's kind of how that works, but as far as it's all one board and all of that. We do have our own handbook because we got different things that we do. In junior high, if you don't turn your work in on time, you can get a detention. In high school, you just flunk. So, which actually solves the problem really quickly. Now, middle school is talking about they want to switch to that.
I think that Plano has opportunity for students to Zoom in.
Yes.
Do you do that at the high school level?
Yes.
And how does that function?
Okay, so somebody was asking me, what's the difference between you guys and Wittenberg? And it's really what fits for your family best. If you want to have lots of flexibility in your scheduling and all those types of things, Wittenberg is a great fit for those types of things. If you come to my program, you have to log in when the class is going on. And so, for example, we've actually had people from overseas because Violet Hoff was in the Czech Republic logging in, And there's quite a time change for that, so she was getting up very early in the morning to log into our class. But they log in during the class period, they pop up on a screen facing me, the camera faces on me, we've got a nice sound system that they can hear what people are saying. I call on them just like I would on a student, and it's live talk interaction. It's basically how that works. So it has to fit into your schedule. We don't do that for every single class, so there's no way right now that you could graduate from faith as an online student. It's as a supplement to what you're doing outside. Because, for example, there's no way for you to log in for a chemistry lab.
So one of the challenges of being virtual, even when you do all virtual classes, is being able to see the cues
Yes.
of the other class and knowing that somebody was about to ask a question, so you choose to wait and let them ask. How does that function when that person can't see anybody else and they can't see him or her?
Oh, they can. The camera's in the back of the room. It's
Okay.
across up
It's
there, so
focused
they can
on
see
you, but
some
they
other
can
people.
sort of.
Yeah, it's focused on me, but they can see other people and they can certainly hear them and so forth. So and it depends on how many people are doing that online. I've had as many as 4 online students at the same time, so then they kind of can, they can send little messages back and forth on that. No, you ask him. I don't want to ask him. And I'm sitting here, I can read what you're writing.
Do you have a cap?
On how many? 4 is the cap, largely because the size of the monitor that I'm using, that's as big as the quadrants is. Any smaller than that, I wouldn't be able to see them. So, yes.
Kind of piggybacking off what you said, how does that work as far, do they receive credit? Also, how much do they have to pay per class? And is it the same for Zoom as if they're classical conversations, taking it in person?
If they come in, if they're taking it online, yes, it would be the same as if they were in the area and they come in and take the class. And they do get credit for it, they get a transcript for it at the end and so forth. They would have a transcript of all the credits that they've taken from us. And so they would have availability of that. We used to let people in the local area, we had a few homeschoolers that were doing the online one, and then we basically said, if you're in the area, come into class. So we basically had all them transition to just coming in during the class period. And then we try to be sensitive to if they're taking 2 classes. I'm also the one that does the scheduling, so I try to make sure the schedule is conducive for them so they're not coming in here and then 4 hours later they have another class. Try to be sensitive.
So on your chart, which is very helpful, thank you. You have a couple of places where it's something like English 1 and Honors English 1, or Biology and Honors Biology. Talk about how you guys do that.
Okay.
Are those different classes? How does that work?
Okay. Currently, the classes are taught in conjunction, so it's not a separate honors class. In some ways, it would be nice to get to a separate honors class, but on the other hand, it's still a benefit to the core students to hear what the honors students are doing. So basically, it has to do with the amount of reading that they're expected to do and how tough I am on grading that. So usually we read 2 books at once. I try to pick one that's maybe an easier read and then one that is kind of a more important read for that particular unit. And typically a freshman would read about 30 pages a night. Is a pretty typical assignment. By the time they get to their senior year, it's closer to 50 pages a night that they're reading. And then they would have questions that they would need to answer. And the way that I test them on the test is I try to use the trivium idea. So I have what I call grammar stage questions, which are spit out a fact that you memorize from the story. So asking who did such and such, or what year did this happen? So they usually have about 25 of those, and they all have to be done in complete sentences. And then then I have 2 to 3 what I call a logic stage question, which is more take a concept from this book and explain it to me, or take an idea from this book and explain it for me. And then those have to be paragraphed, 1 to 2 paragraphs. And then we have the big question, the big rhetoric question. The big rhetoric question always says, you're going to take something from this book and you're going to apply it to something outside of the book. And it has to be a page and a half to 2 pages long. So this is what they have to do for the test. And if they are doing a core learning class, I'm much more lenient on what I expect of them and so forth. For example, usually the grammar stage questions are worth 5 points each. You get a half point off for spelling or punctuation error if you're in the core class. You get a full point off. That's an 80 on that question. You just got an 80 on number 1 because you didn't put capital letter, and then mark, and so on and so forth. You've done surely grammar fluent there. So I'm a lot stricter about what I expect of them. The other big difference is freshmen that are in the honors class have to do a 25-page paper over the course of the year, and the freshmen that are in the core only have to do 15 pages. That sounds like a lot to do, but they have to pick a topic at the very beginning with my help that is a theme that will be common in all the literature and the history that we're going to be studying for the year. So courage, for example. And then they're going to write and say, Merriam-Webster defines courage as this, dictionary.com defines it this way. For the purpose of my paper, courage means this. Next paragraph. Throughout history and literature, there have been many examples of people who practiced courage or failed to practice courage. I'm going to discuss it in the books we read this year. Well, guess what? When you read 25 books, that's a page a book. It's not that hard to do. So they'll go through and they'll talk about each of the books, what they've read. So it was easy, right? She had to do it last year. Yeah, piece of cake. So they'll go through and do that. And also, like I said, I have a lot higher expectations for them. If you're in the core class, I will give you the sections of the book that are essential for you to read to get the key concepts and to understand why we're reading the book. And what I always ask them to do is read those key sections, go do all your other subjects' homework. If you still got a little time before bed, go back and read as much of it as you can, but don't stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning reading if you're in the core class. Because most of the people that choose the core are probably ones that it just takes them a long time to read. So. Yes?
Having everyone together, just listening to you describe it, are there ever issues among like the community of students if they know, oh, you're in the core and you only have to do X amount of work, but now I have to do, or like, do they care among each other who's on what degree track?
I would say it's the other way around.
Yeah?
It's the other way around. It's not, I've never heard a honor student jealous that the others had to do less. I've never heard that. I've heard it the other way where, well, I wish I could do the honors track. Maybe I should try it or whatever else. I usually encourage them, if they are reasonably fast readers, to start out in the honors program, and if it's too much, you can always drop back again. But like for distinguished, you can't decide I'm going to be core the first semester and then graduate distinguished. You're done. Everything has to be at the honors level if you want to graduate distinguished, because it's distinguished. And they get a different seal that goes on their transcript.
Yeah.
So what are your numbers? You said, did I hear 37?
37.
How many of them are on the distinguished track?
Oh, let's see. My seniors, there's going to be, I think, 5 of the 8 are on distinguished in that particular one. Most of the students are on the distinguished track right now, and that's simply because most everyone can handle the honors classes freshman and sophomore year. Physics smacks them upside the head. That's usually physics, and upper division math are usually when students suddenly go, honors sounds good. I don't need to do distinguished. Honors sounds great to me. It's usually one of those two that does that, because it's a difference between explain what velocity is and calculate velocity using advanced math. There's a difference between the levels for those upper division classes. They're a lot harder to be able to do. And most of our students are very motivated and do a million electives as well. So they'll be, well, I want to be in handbells, but I want to do choir too. Oh, and I still want to play violin. Okay, well, you're not going to have any spare time, but yeah, great. So most of them will do that type of thing. And I often get that question. You know, I had my 4 boys go through the school. And so I got that question from other parents. Well, you're a parent. Don't you feel bad that your kids didn't have that much free time because, you know, they were in the music program and then they were playing sports? And I said, no, because teenagers make terrible choices with free time. I don't want them to have that much free time. Now, time for contemplation and stuff is one thing, but they make terrible choices most of the time if you give them free time. So no, I didn't want them to have lots of free time. And you know, they still get plenty of time. We also do a ton of social activities with these guys, tons of them, which is, you know, one of the reasons that I think the students like hanging out together is we do a lot of those things. So we'll do lock-in events, and we do an outdoor education event at the beginning of the year that does team building and different things like that. And it'll be up on the high roads at this camp and all this type of stuff. And then we do dances, and even the online ones have flown in from around the country for the dances and things. So they'll come to events like that. So we do a lot of fun things.
Yeah, I was there from the beginning, and it was challenging, and it was small, it was slow, but now it's gained in popularity. What would you say to a startup high school today? How would you encourage them?
I would say, again, it depends on if you're starting from scratch or if you're adding to your program. Either one is going to have challenges and is going to be difficult, and you need to just be committed to doing that. We actually false started at our high school twice, okay? And the reason was because the one time they said, we want 6 students by this date or we're not going to start. And I had 4 students by that date and a couple more that were interested, and they said, okay, we're not doing it. And so then we went and raised the money and said, well, it doesn't matter if we have the students or not, we have the money, so we can start. And they were okay with that. And that's why I say raise that money up front and have it available, and just assume that the school is probably going to take a loss for a few years. Just build that right in and have that money set aside to cover that. The chance that you're just going to leap right out and make money that's not our model.
Did you open a grade a year, or did you start all 4 years?
We opened a grade a year, and the main reason goes back to the question that you were asking about transfer students coming in. It's killer for transfer students coming in to be able to really adjust to and to do the program. And so, yeah, we started it a year at a time, went forward. And one of the challenges that we ran into at the beginning was because the school had existed for 30 years at that time beforehand without a high school, everyone's brother and sister went to another school. So they want to go where brother and sister are going, especially when brother and sister are telling them how easy it is, right? Most kids don't choose hard things for themselves without some encouragement. And so we now are past that point. We're to the point where it's the expectation that they're going to stay. We got, like I said, 14 out of 16 8th graders stayed for next year. And we've had a majority for the last couple of years. So that's been nice. We've turned that corner now and we've got there. But it takes time and it takes dedication. The other reason that we didn't start all the grades at once is I didn't have a classical education, which means I hadn't read all the books that I'm teaching at that time. So I started, when I knew that I was going to be the teacher for the first class, I started a year ahead of the students reading the great books, going through reading them. And by the end of the second year, I was only a month ahead of them. I was a year ahead when we started the first year, and I was only a month ahead of them by the end of the second year. it's challenging to get through all of these books and to read them.
Why does Faith plan on not receive government funding?
Well, there's nothing better.
Because the government's trash. We have gone so far as to, they used to give, certain title funds and things like that, and they had let us buy these books that we could store in our location, but they were stamped as property of Plano ISD and all this type of stuff, and we're just like, no, we don't even want that anymore. It's, this is something, I don't know if you followed this since you moved on here, Pastor, but there's a very good chance that Texas is going to finally pass the Voucher Act. And Faith is not taking vouchers. We're just not, because what it start out is, well, we give the voucher to the parents, so we don't have any control over the school. Yeah, until 70% of your funding comes from vouchers, and then they can tell you to do whatever they want. So we have no interest in taking government funding and getting involved in that stuff. So we have, we keep up with government standards on things that you have to do in terms of, we operate, we're preschool through, so, there's rules and regulations, like the high schoolers can go down and do reading partners with the preschoolers, but they don't go to the same bathrooms, right? I mean, there's rules about this stuff. There's laws that you do have to follow, so, which is why it's also good to hire somebody who has some education experience as your administrator and has some familiarity with these things, either in education or actual experience.
How much at the high school level do you have multiple subjects that are taught by the same teacher versus individual subjects?
Most of it's individual subjects. It's almost all individual subjects. Really, Omnibus is the only one where we're doing the subjects together. So, basically we have a cycle where year one we do from creation to the birth of Christ. So we start out, they're reading Genesis and theology. We're reading the Epic of Gilgamesh, which has, overlaps with the story of the Bible because it's got the Noah story and different things like that overlap with that. And then I start them out nice and easy, and I let them read The Magician's Nephew, which also has a creation account. So they have things like that, but then it progresses through, the Odyssey, and we do Sophocles and Eusebius and all these others as we go through and do that. And then finally get into the Roman stuff. The pastors go through Old Testament books of history primarily in year one. So it's primarily the ones that are, accounts of the history in Scripture and so forth, and also Psalms and Proverbs. And then the next year is from the birth of Christ to the Reformation era. So that's the period that's covered in there. We read St. Augustine, St. Athanasius, all those books, and the pastors do prophetic books from the Old Testament for the first semester, and then their completion in 2 of the Gospels and on into the epistles in the second semester. So they cover a bunch of the books of the Bible, and then the remaining books of the Bible are built into the class that I teach, which also does world religions, because they read parts of the Quran so they can see for themselves. It really does say kill the infidel where you find him. They're able to go through and see different things like that, and then we do apologetics in the senior year as well. The third time period for the juniors then is from Reformation to the modern era, and that's what we do English, primarily British and American authors in there.
Ask a follow-up question to that. How do you then manage the integration that we talk about for classical education?
How is that integrated into classical education?
No. How do you accomplish integration across disciplines with multiple teachers?
Okay. A lot of meetings and communication with them. For example, there's a lot of crossover between when they're studying astronomy with Ms. Roundy for their senior science class. There's a lot of crossover with the Omnibus class because we read Copernicus and we read Galileo and we read various other pieces as we go through there, so there's crossover there. There's crossover with math, because when we're talking about various mathematicians, then she ties that into historical things with that as well. She does a really good job with that. Mrs. Mildred does a really good job with that. So there's crossover that way. There's crossover in Latin because we are reading translations of some of the things that they're reading in Latin. So there's some crossover that goes there as well. And then Pastor Kieser has done Greek with them the last 3 years. And he'll have Greek 3s for the first time next year. They actually completed, and don't ask me the author's name, I can't remember it, but whatever book they used at the seminary to teach Greek, it's the one that he took them through, and they actually completed it last year. So then he took them for a Greek dinner. He took them out to a Greek restaurant, and they had a nice Greek dinner, and I guess the guy was a lot of fun that was at the restaurant. It was really enjoyable time, so they got to do that. We also do things to integrate in, like we have a Latin day, and during the Latin day, all of the teachers do something. So it might be like, I'm in charge of gladiatorial games, so I have to take them downstairs and give them training, and then after they're properly trained, if they dare, they can step into the ring against me. So they get to come in, and I've got these foam sword things that we can smack each other with, so it's fun. Get to come in and do that. So we do different things like that to integrate things together as well. We'd like to do more, but see, that would be an answer to what I've heard some other people talk about this as well. We're struggling with the same thing that you guys are, which is there is not enough time in the day to cover everything that we would like to cover. There just isn't. The school day was busy enough before we added Latin, we added this and we added that. And so the question is, how can you cover what's important and cut back on some of that? Well, integrating these classes would be a good way to do it, instead of having a separate period for every single one of them. That's one of the ways that you can do it, but it does take a lot of coordination. That it? All right, I was also, I was told that it's possible some of you might still have more questions and want to get together in the evening or something like that. So if you're interested in doing that, we can meet somewhere and get together and talk further if you just want to bounce ideas or so forth. There's a number of different places to start these schools right now. So. Thank you.